The scratch of the pen against the paper sounded louder than a gunshot in the silence of the office. It was a deliberate, jagged sound, like a knife carving into bone. I stood at parade rest, my hands clasped behind my back so tightly that my knuckles were turning white, throbbing with the rhythm of my own heartbeat. The air in the room was stale, smelling of burnt coffee and aggressive floor wax, a sterile scent that tried to mask the underlying rot of the place. Across the desk, Captain Vance didn't look up. He just kept writing, the nib of his expensive fountain pen bleeding black ink into the crisp white fiber of the counseling form. He was rewriting history in real time, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. He finally stopped, capped the pen with a soft, satisfying click, and slid the paper across the mahogany surface toward me. It moved slowly, like a verdict. I looked down. The words swam for a second before snapping into focus. Sharp and damning. Gross. Negligence, it read. Failure to secure sensitive communications equipment resulting in a security breach. It was a lie. A complete, fabricated, catastrophic lie. I had secured that comms gear. I had double-checked the encryption keys. I had signed the logbook. But the logbook was gone. And now, this piece of paper was the only truth that mattered. Vance leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking. He was a small man who took up too much space, his uniform tailored too tight, his eyes devoid of anything resembling leadership. He looked at me with a bored, almost sleepy expression, the look of a man swatting a fly. He tapped the signature line with his index finger. Sign it, his eyes said. Sign away your promotion. Sign away your reputation. Sign away the last 6 years of your life. I could feel the heat rising up the back of my neck, a physical wave of nausea and rage. If I signed, I was admitting guilt. If I didn't, I was disobeying a direct order and facing a court-martial for insubordination on top of the negligence charge. He knew it. He had engineered the perfect trap. Is there a problem, Sergeant? Vance asked, his voice smooth, lacking any jagged edges. It was the voice of a politician, not a soldier. He picked up a stress ball from his desk and squeezed it rhythmically. You look confused. The report is quite clear. You left the radio unsecured in the mesmerizing chaos of the motor pool. It's a rookie mistake. Disappointing, really, for someone with your potential. Sir, I started, my voice sounding gravelly, foreign to my own ears. I logged that equipment in at 1400 hours. The quartermaster signed off on it. If you check the quartermaster's logs show no such entry, Vance interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, turning cold. I checked them myself. Are you accusing me of error, Sergeant? Or are you suggesting a conspiracy? He smiled then, a thin, bloodless expression. Sign the document. Take your Article 15. Do your extra duty. Don't make this a court-martial offense. You won't win. I looked at the paper again. I looked at his smug, untouchable face. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, not from fear, but from a fury so intense it felt like I was swallowing broken glass. I signed. In that moment, I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was a scapegoat. I was the grease in his machine, crushed to keep his career moving forward. I set the pen down. Dismissed, Vance whispered. I turned on my heel, executed a perfect about-face, and walked out. But as I crossed the threshold, leaving the air-conditioned office for the oppressive heat of the hallway, I knew the war had just started, and I was already behind enemy lines. Forward Operating Base Echo was a scar on the landscape, a sprawling grid of HESCO barriers, gravel, and beige tents sitting in the middle of a dust bowl that God had forgotten. The wind never stopped blowing. It carried a fine, gritty silt that worked its way into everything. Your pores, your food, the action of your rifle, your dreams. It was a place of routine, and routine is usually what keeps a soldier sane. Wake up, PT, chow, maintenance, patrol, sleep, repeat. But after that meeting in Vance's office, the routine transformed into a prison. The base was alive with the hum of generators and the distant thud of helicopters, a mechanical symphony that usually comforted me. Now, it sounded like mocking laughter. I walked toward the barracks, my boots crunching on the gravel, feeling the weight of invisible eyes on me. News travels faster than light in a platoon. They already knew, maybe not the details, but they knew the scent of failure. They knew the commander had marked me. I entered the tent, the sudden shade blinding me for a second. The air inside was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, gun oil, and damp socks. My squad was there, cleaning weapons, playing cards. The chatter died instantly. It wasn't a gradual silence. It was a guillotine chop. Private Reynolds, kid I had trained from day one, looked up and then quickly looked down, pretending to scrub a spot on his receiver that didn't exist. Corporal Holloway, my second in command, shifted uncomfortably on his cot, refusing to meet my gaze. I walked to my bunk, the metal springs groaning as I sat. I began to unlace my boots, focusing entirely on the black laces, the eyelets, the dust. I needed to ground myself in the physical reality of the moment because my mind was spinning out of control. Vance wasn't just giving me a slap on the wrist. He was systematically dismantling me. He needed a fall guy for the inspection failures the battalion commander had noted last month. Vance had cut corners on maintenance budgets to pad his own efficiency reports, and now that equipment was failing, he needed a body to throw on the wire. I was that body. At the far end of the tent, sitting in the shadows near the rear flap, was Warrant Officer Miller. He was a ghost of a man, the platoon's technical advisor, a veteran of 3 different wars who spoke less than a monk. He was cleaning a pair of optics, his movements slow and deliberate. He paused, looking up at me. His eyes were gray, hard, and unreadable. He didn't look away like the others. He held my gaze for a second, just long enough to acknowledge I was there, and then went back to his work. Miller saw everything. He heard everything. But Miller never got involved. In the military, survival often meant knowing when to be deaf, dumb, and blind. I lay back on the cot, staring up at the canvas ceiling. A fly buzzed lazily against the fabric. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was Vance's smile, the way he clicked the pen, the way he erased my integrity with a few strokes of ink. I had to survive this. I had to outlast him, but deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wasn't going to stop with a simple reprimand. Vance was a predator, and he had tasted blood. The escalation began 3 days later. It wasn't subtle. It was a bludgeoning. We were prepping for a supply run to a local village, a routine hearts and minds operation. I was double-checking the loadout on the Humvees, ensuring the ammunition counts were correct. I was meticulous. I had to be. I couldn't give Vance a single inch of real estate to attack. I counted every magazine, every grenade, every bottle of water. I signed the manifest and handed it to the supply sergeant. 20 minutes later, Vance stormed into the motor pool. He wasn't walking. He was marching, flanked by his executive officer, a sycophant named Lieutenant Drake, who mimicked Vance's every move like a shadow. "Sergeant!" Vance barked, his voice cutting through the roar of the idling engines. "Front and center!" I jogged over, snapping a salute. "Sir!" Vance held up a clipboard, shaking it in my face. "Do you take me for a fool? Do you think I can't count? Sir, this manifest," he shouted, making sure the entire platoon could hear him. "You listed 12 crates of MREs. There are only 10 loaded on Vehicle 3. Where are the other 2? Are you stealing rations, Sergeant? Are you selling them on the black market?" The accusation hung in the air, absurd and poisonous. "Sir, I counted them myself. 12 crates. I watched them get loaded." "Then you're blind or incompetent," Vance screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "Unload Vehicle 3, now! We are doing a full inventory. Everyone holds." The humiliation was total. My men, the soldiers I had led through firefights, had to stop, unload the entire truck, and lay everything out in the dust while Vance paced back and forth like a king inspecting his subjects. We counted. There were 10 crates. My stomach dropped. I looked at the supply sergeant. He looked away, his face pale. Vance had gotten to him. He had ordered the removal of the crates after I had checked them. It was a setup, a childish, petty, career-ending setup. 10, Vance sneered. "You can't even count to 12. You are a liability to this unit. Get out of my sight. Holloway, you're in charge of the convoy. Sergeant, you are relieved of duty for the day. Report to the command tent for disciplinary action." I stood there, the desert sun beating down on me, feeling the heat radiating from the metal of the Humvee. My men were watching. I could see the doubt creeping into their eyes. That was Vance's real goal. It wasn't about the crates. It was about severing the bond between me and my squad. If he could make them doubt my competence, he stripped me of my power. Without their trust, I was nothing. I walked away, my boots heavy as lead. As I passed the maintenance bay, I saw Warrant Officer Miller leaning against a stack of tires, smoking a cigarette. He watched the whole thing. He watched Vance orchestrate the theater. He took a long drag, exhaled a plume of blue smoke, and just watched. He knew. He had to know, but knowing and speaking were two different things. And in Vance's army, speaking was a suicide mission. The fall was not a sudden drop. It was a long, suffocating slide into the abyss. Vance stripped me of my squad leader status, pending investigation. I was reassigned to general duties, the kind of work reserved for fresh privates or screw-ups. I spent my days burning trash in the pits, the acrid black smoke filling my lungs, coating my skin in a layer of grime that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I dug latrines. I filled thousands of sandbags until my hands were blistered and raw, the blood mixing with the sand to form a dark, rusty paste. The isolation was absolute. The men were afraid to talk to me. They knew Vance was watching. Guilt by association is a powerful deterrent. If they were seen laughing with me, they might be next on the roster for trash duty. So they walked past me with their heads down, murmuring quick, guilty greetings, or ignoring me entirely. I was a ghost haunting my own life. The psychological weight was heavier than the sandbags. I stopped sleeping. I would lie awake at night, listening to the breathing of the men around me, replaying every interaction with Vance, looking for the way out, the legal loophole, the procedure he missed. But he was thorough. His paperwork was impeccable. He was documenting a pattern of behavior, negligence, insubordination, incompetence. He was building a file so thick that when he finally crushed me, no review board in the world would question it. One afternoon, I returned to my bunk to find my personal locker tossed. My letters from home, the few lifelines I had to sanity, were scattered across the dirt floor. Some were torn. Photos of my wife and daughter were face down in the dust. I fell to my knees, gathering them up with trembling hands. This wasn't official punishment. This was cruelty. This was Vance telling me that he could reach into the deepest, most private parts of my life and destroy them just because he could. I sat on the edge of my cot, holding a torn picture of my daughter's 4th birthday party. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. I brushed it away angrily. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march into his office and put him through the wall. But that was what he wanted. He wanted me to snap. He was pushing and pushing, waiting for me to throw the first punch so he could lock me away in Leavenworth for 20 years. Don't! The voice came from the shadows. I looked up. Warrant Officer Miller was there again, sitting on his footlocker, polishing his boots. He didn't look at me. He just kept working the rag in small, perfect circles. Don't what? I rasped, my voice hoarse from the smoke of the burn pit. Don't give him the satisfaction, Miller said quietly. He feeds on it. The anger, the reaction, it's fuel. He's destroying me, Chief. He's burning everything down. Miller stopped polishing. He looked at the boot, inspecting the shine in the low light. Fire purifies, Sergeant, or it consumes. Depends on what you're made of. He finally looked at me. Keep your head down. Do the work. Document everything. The wheel turns. It always turns. He stood up and walked out of the tent, leaving me alone with the torn photos. But something in the air had shifted. The wheel turns. It was a sliver of hope, sharp and thin, but it was enough. I wiped my face. I taped the photo back together. I wasn't going to burn. I was going to become something that fire couldn't touch. I stopped fighting the punishment. I embraced it. They wanted me to fill sandbags. I filled them faster and harder than anyone else. They wanted me to burn trash. I made those pits immaculate. I turned the manual labor into my own personal training camp. Every shovel of dirt was a rep. Every hour in the sun was conditioning. I withdrew into myself, building a fortress of discipline that Vance couldn't penetrate. I started waking up at 0300, 2 hours before Reveille. I went to the makeshift gym in the supply hangar, a collection of rusty plates and welded bars. I lifted until my muscles screamed, pushing my body past exhaustion, past pain, into a state of numb efficiency. One morning, around 0345, I was under the bench press, sweat pooling in my eyes. I racked the weight and sat up, gasping for air. Miller was there. He was on the rowing machine in the corner, moving with a rhythmic, mesmerizing cadence. He stopped when he saw me looking. He didn't smile. He just nodded, a barely perceptible tilt of his chin, and went back to rowing. We never spoke during those sessions. We didn't need to. It was a silent pact. He was the witness to my reconstruction. He saw that I wasn't breaking. I was hardening. I began to study too. I got my hands on the field manuals, the regulations, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I memorized them. I started keeping my own log, a small black notebook I hid inside my mattress. I wrote down times, dates, inconsistencies in Vance's orders. I noted when he disappeared during duty hours. I noted the smell of alcohol on his breath during the morning briefings. I became a spy in my own unit. My squad started to notice the change. The pity in their eyes was replaced by a cautious respect. I wasn't complaining. I wasn't begging. I was outworking them, even from the bottom of the pile. "Sarge," Reynolds whispered to me one day while we were in the chow line. He slid an extra apple onto my tray. "Vance is looking for you. He looks pissed. He can't figure out why you haven't cracked. Yet." "Let him look," I said, taking the apple. "I'm right here." I was ready. I didn't know what for, but I was sharp. My uniform was perfect, despite the dirty work. My weapon was spotless. My mind was clear. I was a loaded gun waiting for a trigger. And then, the trigger was pulled. It started with a sound that every soldier knows in their marrow, the thump whoosh of incoming mortars. The first round impacted the perimeter wall, shaking the ground and sending a plume of gravel geysering into the air. The siren began to wail, a rising and falling scream that shattered the morning calm. "Incoming! Incoming!" The cry went up, panicked and frantic. I dropped my shovel and sprinted toward the barracks to grab my gear. Explosions were walking across the compound now, closer, louder. Dust filled the air, turning the world into a brown, choking fog. I burst into the tent. Men were scrambling, struggling into body armor, tripping over boots. "Get your gear! Move! Move! Move!" I roared, my command voice returning instantly, overriding the rank I had lost. The men responded. They looked to me, not Holloway. Instinct knows leadership when it sees it. We spilled out into the chaos. The base was under a complex attack. Small arms fire was cracking from the North Ridge. Heavy machine guns, RPGs. They were breaching the perimeter. I ran toward the Tactical Operations Center, TOC. I needed orders. I needed to know where to position the defense. As I rounded the corner of the command building, I saw him, Captain Vance. He was outside the TOC, huddled behind a concrete blast wall. He wasn't shouting orders. He wasn't on the radio. He was curled into a ball, his helmet askew, clutching his rifle like a frightened child. His eyes were wide, vacant, consumed by terror. "Sir!" I yelled, grabbing his shoulder. "We have a breach at the north gate. We need fire support. What are your orders?" Vance looked at me, but he didn't see me. He scrambled backward, pushing me away. "They're everywhere," he whimpered. We have to pull back. We can't pull back. The barracks are exposed. We have to hold the line. Get away from me," Vance screamed, panic shattering his voice. He scrambled to his feet and ran, not toward the fight, not toward the men, but toward the hardened bunkers at the rear of the base, the safe zone. He was abandoning his command. He was leaving us to die. I watched him go, a fleeting shadow of cowardice disappearing into the dust. "Miller!" I shouted. The warrant officer appeared through the smoke, his face calm, his rifle raised. He had seen it. He had seen the commander run. "Take the left flank," I ordered. "I'm going to the TOC. I need the radio." Miller nodded once. "Give 'em hell, Sergeant." I sprinted into the TOC. The room was empty. The staff had evacuated or taken cover. The radios were buzzing with static and panicked calls from the guard towers. "Tower 4 down. We are taking heavy fire. They're inside the wire. Need support." I grabbed the handset of the main comms unit. I keyed the mic. "All stations, this is Sierra 1. Commander is indisposed. I am assuming command of the defense. Squad A, suppressive fire on the ridge. Squad B, on me. We are plugging the breach." I didn't know if it would work. I was just a disgraced sergeant. But the voices came back. "Roger, Sierra 1, moving." I coordinated the initial defense for 3 minutes, calling in mortar strikes, shifting fire teams. But the radio wasn't enough. The breach was widening. They needed bodies in the gap. I grabbed my rifle, slammed a fresh magazine home, and ran back out into the hellscape. The air outside was alive with the snap and hiss of bullets. I sprinted toward the north wall, where the fighting was thickest. I saw Reynolds and Holloway pinned down behind a stack of crates, their return fire sporadic. "Suppressing fire!" I screamed, sliding into the dirt beside them. "Cover me!" I popped up, firing controlled, bursts at the shapes moving through the dust. The recoil of the rifle dug into my shoulder, a familiar, grounding pain. We were holding them, barely. Then, the world exploded. An RPG struck the HESCO barrier 5 feet to my right. The concussive force was like a giant, invisible hand swatting me out of existence. I was lifted off my feet and thrown backward, slamming hard into the gravel. Silence. For a moment, there was no sound, no gunfire, no screaming, just a high-pitched, piercing ring that drilled into the center of my skull. I stared up at the sky, which was brown and swirling. My vision blurred, doubling. I tried to breathe, but my lungs felt collapsed. I tasted copper, blood. I wiped my face and my hand came away red. A piece of shrapnel or stone had sliced my cheek open, just below the eye. I rolled onto my stomach, the world tilting crazily. Through the ringing in my ears, sound began to bleed back in, dull thuds at first, then the sharp cracks of rifles. I looked up. Reynolds was down. He was 10 yards away, writhing in the open, clutching his leg. The dust around him was puffing up in little spurts as enemy fire walked toward him. Fear, cold and primal, gripped my chest. I could stay here. I could stay behind this cover. No one would blame me. I was injured. I was the scapegoat. Vance was safe in a bunker, probably radioing for help to save his own skin. A dark thought flashed through my mind, sharp and ugly. Let it burn. Let Vance explain why his men died while he hid. Let the whole damn thing rot. It would be the ultimate revenge. If we fell, Vance fell. Then Reynolds screamed. The darkness in my mind vanished. It wasn't about Vance. It wasn't about my rank. It was about the kid bleeding in the dirt who I had taught to tie his boots. "Cover fire now!" I roared, though I couldn't hear my own voice over the ringing. I scrambled to my feet, my balance swaying, and sprinted into the open. The air felt hot around me, bullets snapping past like angry hornets. One tugged at my sleeve, tearing the fabric. I didn't stop. I slid into the dirt next to Reynolds. He was pale, eyes wide with shock. "I got you!" I yelled, grabbing his vest handle. "We're moving!" I dragged him. Every step was a battle. My lungs burned, my head swam, and the blood from my cheek dripped onto my hands, making them slick. I pulled him 10 yards, 20 yards, back to the hard cover of a concrete wall. I collapsed beside him, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs, like it wanted to break free. Holloway was there, applying a tourniquet to Reynolds' leg. He looked at me, his eyes wide. He looked at the blood on my face, the tear in my uniform. He nodded. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of the world. We were soldiers again. We held the line. We pushed them back. And when the dust settled, and the medevac choppers were spinning up to take the wounded, I stood by the breach, covered in sweat, carbon, and dried blood. My head was still, pounding, a rhythmic reminder that I was alive. Vance crawled out of the bunker an hour later, once the all clear had sounded. He tried to walk among the men, looking concerned, barking belated orders. But the silence that met him was deafening. They knew. The whole base knew. And as he walked past me, he saw the blood on my face, and he looked away. The tribunal took place 3 weeks later at a regional command base in Germany. The room was sterile, air-conditioned, and brightly lit, a stark contrast to the dirt and blood of Fob Echo. I sat at the defense table. I had been reinstated, but Vance had filed charges against me for usurping command and endangering the unit during the attack. He was doubling down. He was trying to bury his cowardice under a mountain of fresh lies. Vance sat across the aisle, looking polished and rested. He gave his testimony with practiced ease. He claimed he was repositioning to a better tactical vantage point when I panicked and took over. The radio, confusing the chain of command. He painted me as a rogue element, a cowboy who got lucky. The panel of 5 officers sat behind a raised dais. They listened, their faces stony masks of judgment. It looked bad. It was his word against mine, and he was an officer. The weight of the institution was designed to protect its own. "Does the defense have any witnesses?" the presiding colonel asked. He was an older man with white hair and eyes that had seen too much. My lawyer stood up. "We call Chief Warrant Officer Miller." A murmur went through the room. Miller walked in, his dress uniform immaculate, his face made of granite. He took the stand. He swore the oath. "Mr. Miller," my lawyer asked, "where were you during the attack on Fob Echo?" "I was near the Tactical Operations Center, sir." "And what did you see?" Miller looked directly at Vance. For the first time, Vance shifted in his chair, a subtle twitch of his left eye betraying his composure. "I saw Captain Vance abandon his post," Miller said, his voice deep and echoing in the quiet room. I saw him flee to the safety bunkers while the defendant rallied the defense. "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted, leaping to his feet. "Hearsay! This is one man's word against a commissioned officer's." "I have evidence," Miller said calmly. He didn't look at the prosecutor. He kept his eyes on the colonel. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital drive. "The TOC records all radio transmissions automatically, but it also has a localized ambient mic for after-action reviews." Captain Vance thought he turned the system off before he ran. He didn't. The room went deathly silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that precedes a storm. The colonel stared at the drive in Miller's hand. He nodded slowly. "Play it." The audio filled the room. It wasn't just the radio chatter. It was the raw sound of reality. First, the thumping chaos of explosions. Then, Vance's voice, high, shrill, and unrecognizable as a command voice. "I'm not dying here. I'm not dying for this." Then the frantic scrabbling of boots on concrete, the sound of a man running for his life. Then, a pause, heavy breathing, and then my voice cut through the static. Calm, steady, but underneath the calm, you could hear the strain, the choice being made. "All stations. I am assuming command." The recording ended, but the echo of Vance's panic seemed to hang in the air. I looked at the panel of officers. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at Vance. Their expressions were a mix of professional horror and deep, visceral disgust. The colonel's knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the table. In the military, incompetence can be forgiven. Mistakes can be trained out. But cowardice is a contagion. I looked at Vance. He hadn't just deflated. He looked like a man whose soul had been extracted. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked around the room, searching for an ally, but found only a wall of cold, silent judgment. His eyes met mine for a split second, and in them, I saw the terrifying realization that his career, his pension, his entire identity had just been incinerated by the truth. The colonel cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel strike. "Captain, you will stand down immediately. The MPs will escort you to the brig pending a general court-martial for dereliction of duty and cowardice in the face of the enemy." Vance stood up, his legs shaking so badly he had to lean on the table. He was let out, a ghost in a uniform he no longer deserved. I walked out of the tribunal building into the crisp German air. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue, innocent of the violence of the past months. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, flushing out the last of the desert dust. My career was saved. My rank was restored. But as I stood there, touching the fresh pink scar on my cheekbone, I knew I wasn't the same man who had walked into Vance's office to sign that paper. I was harder. I was wiser. I had looked into the abyss of corruption and hadn't blinked. Miller was waiting for me by the curb, smoking a cigarette. He exhaled a long plume of smoke into the sunlight. "Buy you a drink, Chief?" I asked. He looked at me, and a rare, genuine smile cracked his face. "You buy." I watched. We started walking down the street, boots in rhythm on the pavement. The system had failed, but the truth had survived. It survived because we held on to it when everything else was burning. I realized then that the uniform doesn't make the soldier. The rank doesn't make the leader. It's what you do when the shrapnel flies and the lights go out. I paused and looked back at the courthouse one last time. The wheels of the world grind slow, but they grind fine. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just waits. Where loyalty ends, justice begins.